When an artist applies elements of color theory to a painting, it's either to realistically reproduce existing colors or to alter colors and harmonize them according to their tastes. Color theory is great for both. It helps us artists paint realistic colors or compose harmoniously. But the real challenge is to modify colors and keep them realistic at the same time. Because if you push a color change too far, you run the risk of ruining the illusion of realism, and your attempt at harmony ends up creating a jarring, unrealistic conflict. So how can one do both? Tweak the colors and keep them realistic at the same time. That's what we'll be talking about today. A question recently came up in our amazing community. Someone had a photo reference but was not really happy with the look of the colors as captured by the camera. So the idea was to change some of the colors in the reference photo to create a more harmonious artistic balance. But the trap is that changing the colors too much might also ruin what made the image stand out in the first place. So this is the classic artist's dilemma. Cameras, they capture perfect optical likeness, mechanical likeness, but they don't think about poetry. So if the colors as seen in nature don't really harmonize well together, who cares? The camera doesn't change it, but the eye of the artist has this ability and this desire to make the colors as perfect as possible. A lens of a camera records everything indiscriminately, which often results in something that might look chaotic. You might have competing colors. As painters, we therefore have the right and the duty to edit reality, tweak things for the sake of art. So here is how you can completely rewrite the color script of a reference photo while keeping the painting grounded in believable reality. First, let me explain why you need to understand the light context of your model in your painting. Harmonizing a scene lit by a single warm candle, for example, is a completely different problem than harmonizing a scene that's under, like, I don't know, some kind of white studio light or overcast sunlight. A bright overcast afternoon creates an entirely different world than a golden hour landscape, for example. The reason for this comes down to what we call the gamut. Simply put, a color gamut is the entire range of colors that are physically possible to see or paint under a specific lighting condition. When a specific light atmosphere blankets a scene, it automatically makes certain part of the color wheel completely unreachable. For example, in a warm, candlelit room, crisp, bright greens simply cannot exist. For example, check this out. Because the light is very neutral, you can see all the little squares here, and they all have different colors. But let's imagine that my light is this now, something very, very yellow, very strong. Look at how some colors become completely out of gamut. Some of the colors that I had before become completely unreachable because they are out of gamut. The gamut has been completely altered by the quality of this lamp here. So you have to first understand that the choice of your pigments really depends on the quality of the light. Is my scene is lit by something like that or something like that? It's going to change completely the type of paint tubes that I can pick to paint this certain scene. The choice of the pigments on your palette is not just something random, because if you choose this pigment, and let's say this one, for example, then what your gamut is going to be is something that is like a triangle connecting the three, which means that everything outside is going to be unreachable. When you create something like that, then the gamut is completely transformed. And you can also start with the gamut, represent the gamut, see the colors that you have, and understand that maybe you will be more in something like that, meaning that all the rest is outside of the gamut. And for that, you might just need a couple of colors that pretty much look similar here. You might take some of this, maybe quinacridone rose, maybe something like olive green, yellow, something like that. This is the notion of gamut. And if you have something like that with a very cool blue turquoise light, what you can do is you observe your colors and you realize very easily that the gamut in this case might be more something like that. And all the rest is unreachable outside of the gamut. Once you know what your gamut is, then you can choose your pigments accordingly and make them match with the atmosphere and the mood of the scene. Now, let's imagine that we have a light that's very, very bluish, and we still want to represent a red that would be here. It's not that it's unusable, it's that every time you mix a red like that, what you're going to do is you're going to take a small amount of this cadmium red, let's say cadmium red. Here we take a small amount of this and we make a big, like on the palette we make a big proportion of this, and we just use a small, very small amount of the cadmium red just to tone it, and we make sure that this one dominates and this one is really just a small touch. And it's going to be enough. It's not going to look at all like a red, but this plus this is going to look redder than the rest, and it's going to be enough to make it appear as it's red. But it's not red in reality. It's going to be some kind of blue, some kind of very muted blue, but it will appear as red because the light context is all blue, and as soon as you make a little touch of red pop, even though it doesn't realistically is a red, it will appear redder than the rest. So that's the strategy. It doesn't mean that all the other colors that are outside of the gamut are unusable, is that every time you use them, you have to make sure that they are coherent with the gamut. So use the gamut color and use a small touch of your color that's outside of the gamut just to indicate the difference, to indicate the delta. And doing this will ensure that your environment feels coherent. So you can still select the colors, change the colors, pick the colors that you prefer. However, they are integrated with the gamut of the scene. So first thing to do whenever you think about modifying any color of any sort is understand the gamut of your light source and ruthlessly restrict your color choices to stay within those boundaries. And if you want to go outside of the boundaries, you have to make sure that the gamut is still the dominant part of your color mixing to ensure absolute environmental coherence. And by the way, if you want to grab a full HD version of all my color wheels in my color system, it's on my website. You just have to follow the links in the description, get there and check out the color wheels and my color system. So once you have defined the boundaries of your gamut, you need to establish a strict hierarchy among your pigments so that they don't all fight for dominance. And right here, we're more into establishing a sort of order between the importance that we accord to different kind of paint tubes. So we are going to start with our main role, the main role of the show, the color that really you want to focus on, that you want your viewers to be attracted by. This is your main tone, not the main role, but the main tone. And then you also have another one, which is the atmospheric tone. So the main tone, like in a movie, is the hero of the composition. This is the most important hue, and it's usually reserved for your primary subject, like the dress of your main character, or maybe the most important part of the jewelry, something where you want the viewer's eye to lock on. This is what should have the highest chroma or saturation and the highest brightness. However, this main role cannot really stand out unless it has something that will work as a supporting role. And this is what I call the atmospheric tone. So once you have your main role, your main tone, you want something that's like a supporting actor. This is a secondary color, a more neutral one that you'll use a lot in the background, in some of the less important areas, but they are still important, so that our main tone can really stand out. The atmospheric tone doesn't have to be anything like a complement or analogous. It doesn't really matter the relation in terms of hue within the space of the color wheel. What matters most is that the chroma of the atmospheric tone, and usually the brightness, so the value, is much lower than the main tone. It must be kept slightly muted, desaturated, sometimes darker, depending on the context. So this atmospheric tone, this atmospheric pigment, will work as a sort of a quiet foil, creating a beautiful duality where the background recedes into the atmosphere, allowing your main subject to really stand out and visually pop. Because when everything screams for attention, nothing really is properly seen, but this intentional contrast between a vibrant subject and a quiet environment is a big secret to create structural harmony. So that's your main duality, but something is still missing in this composition. So while a two-color strategy creates a rock-solid foundation, relying on just these two hues can eventually make a painting feel kind of boring and clinical and just doesn't have enough to be interesting. To truly compose a sophisticated harmony, you need to introduce a third or a fourth color using classic hue relationships. This is what I'm talking about. So now let's say that you have your main role. You decide that your main role is going to be this kind of hue, and your supporting role is going to be this one as the background. So a nice purple dress and a kind of a brownish background in the back, in the landscape, let's say. So now you can decide what you want to do to complement this. You might think, hey, why not create something like that? That would be interesting. And you might think, hey, why not pick something like a green that would be here? What do I have? Phthalo green, cobalt. Okay, nice. You can try this. Or maybe you think, hey, why not make a double complementary? And let's pick up something that would be here. And on the other side, something that would be here. That could be nice. You can play around. The most important thing is that this one is always going to be the strongest one, the most vibrant one, the most chromatic, and the other ones are much more muted and subtle. However, the real mastery comes at the very end when you introduce accents. Accents are tiny, deliberate bites of colors that voluntarily disrupt the harmony that you've worked so hard to build. Think of them like a little spice on a dish. On its own, like this would be terrible, but a pinch of it just makes the entire thing unforgettable. So again, let's imagine that we have, let's say, a split complementary here, but you can add a small, let's say, yellow accent. A very small touch of a yellow can just make something pop, or it can be something different. Maybe something like a little cyan. Just a small little touch, highly saturated, of an unexpected hue placed in a focal area that otherwise wouldn't really too flashy, but it sort of breaks the visual unity just enough to shock the viewer's eye and keep the composition fresh and keep the composition vibrant. If you like this color mixing video, you'll find another one here. I'll see you there, my friends. And as always, joy and inspiration to you. Bye.